Hello. So this is going to be my top 10 favorite Studio Ghibli movies. Now, the Studio Ghibli movies have always have a distinct certain place in my heart as some of the greatest animated movies ever made, which which is also something that is to be said about the founder and director of the studio, Hayao Miyazaki, who is just an incredible filmmaker. And actually, some of the movies I have grown up with a little bit, and maybe not all of them, but some of them, like My Neighbor Totoro, was something I watched as a kid, and I also really enjoyed. And then as I got older, I got to see more of the more adult movies that the studio had made, and it really opened my eyes as to how incredibly unique this studio is compared to other studios who make animated movies, because his movies is something that can be enjoyed from all ages. It's both something that kids can enjoy and adults as well, and even some movies is actually strictly for adults, and some are probably a bit more kid oriented. But in general, I would say that Miyazaki is an incredible director in terms of making movies that practically everyone can enjoy, and actually something that we can learn a lot from, and that can really as inspire a lot of other animators, because many of his movies are also incredible to watch animation wise, and they're just fantastic stories and fantastic characters. And now I'm going to narrow it down to what I think is my top 10 favorites Studio Ghibli movies. Now, just keep in mind, I haven't seen all of his works, but I've seen a good chunk of them, and this is what I think are my 10 favorites. So from number 10 might be a controversial choice, but it's Tales from Earthsea. Now, I know a lot of people have said that this is probably his worst movie, and it's not even Miyazaki's movie, it's made by his son Goro, and I actually think for his first project that it's actually way better than I think people give it credit for. I wouldn't necessarily say it's the greatest, and there are glaring flaws in it, but actually, when you think about that, this movie is based upon I think 4 books made by Ursula de Le Guin. I actually think they get a lot of good things down. I mean, the movie already starts with a big attention grabber, because you see these guys on a boat that spot some dragons in the air, and that they're fighting, but they say that it's wrong that they fight and that this shouldn't be happening. And then we suddenly cut to this castle where there's this king, I think, and he also says that something is brooding and they should do something about it. And then suddenly he gets stabbed by some little boy, who actually turns out to be the son of this king. And then there's just so much going on, but they really takes the time, and it's really simple at first, and I like that, because they really get us to know these characters, and I think the characters are some of the best things about it, because again, there's this boy who is kind of like this underdog outcast who isn't really something special, but then he receives that as a specific message from this guy named Sparrowhawk that there is something afoot and that he needs to do something about it. And also the other characters, like this princess, who they get to know that there is something specific about. I really like that it started out so small, but there is still a mystery as to what is going on, and all the magic that is went out of the place. I really like that it's a fantasy that isn't necessarily trying to be so big as Lord of the Rings all the time. I really also like those movies, but in this case, it's again trying to do some simple things, but actually making it bigger and bigger as time goes on, and it really does it in a great way. Animation-wise, it's also really great. I actually really think that was put a lot of effort into the animation here, especially when you see the dragons and how beautiful they look. I also really like the villain here, who is named Carp, who is just so creepy and unnerving, and it's just an incredible performance, because Willem Dafoe makes a really creepy voice out of him, and it really makes us think that this bad guy is really threatening and he could stab you at any moment. And I will also say that the build up to the climax is really good, but the disappointing thing is the climax, because it could totally have been a lot better. It's very generic, and yeah, that's one of the major flaws. I also really don't think that, the princess girl isn't also really that good and fleshed out, and yeah, maybe there could have been in general a bit more like substance in the middle. Like maybe there could be some other characters who has been more, put more depth to or something. But as a whole, I think it's actually very underrated. And again, for being in the top 10, that has to say something. I mean, I wouldn't say it's a film I would watch again and again and as such, but I really think I enjoyed it the first time. And strangely enough, I ought to maybe try to see it again, because I actually think there was something put into this, that his son actually, that Miyazaki's son actually had made something that was not only just possible but actually good, and therefore I think it deserves to be on this list. It's not really fantastic, but I still thought it was a very good watch and a good fantasy movie. And now the next one is also a really controversial pick. It's My Neighbor Totoro. Now, if I have to think about it, I actually think this might be the first Studio Ghibli film I ever saw, if my memory is correct. And I actually kind of enjoyed it as a kid, but I wouldn't really say I was that into it, as the hype have built up. I mean, this movie is the image of Studio Ghibli. It's supposed to make you feel like, wow, this might be something really big. Like there's so much hype for it. Everybody talks about this movie. And when you see it, now I will get this. I do understand the concept of the film. It's not trying to be a big story-wise. It's much more about character and atmosphere, because it's just about these two little girls and their mom and dad, who is traveling to this new place where they're supposed to live out in the country. And the two girls are just trying to settle in and trying to find out, how this new place works. And they basically just play around, and they do sort of girl things, or kiddish things, like just play around the garden looking for weird stuff. There are animals and creatures that they can find, and getting home and eat dinner and sleep and just sort of the normal everyday stuff. It's a very slice of life kind of film, and I really do like that. But the main problem is that there isn't really a lot happening, and I know that's always the best thing when it comes to the slice of life anime, that there is a lot of happening. But man, I mean, it's just like there's not really that much of a focus until Totoro comes around. That's when it actually gets really fun, because again, it's just like he's this big gray creature who actually kind of reminds me of Big the Cat from Sonic, actually. It's basically just really lazy, really carefree, and just sleeps a lot and doesn't really do a lot, and he takes the bus and such. But really, that's it. That it's hard to explain, because there's not a lot going on, but in some scenes it actually really works, like when they are at this bus stop and we just see Totoro and the girls waiting for a bus to come, which is this bus cat thing who is a really great design. And it's just, even though there's not a lot happening, it's just paced in a way that it's actually really interesting, because you never know what's gonna happen actually when he arrives. It's just really amazing. There's this great fantasy atmosphere when he arrives, and it's so magical to see what will happen next, because all of a sudden, also with the tree scene, it was also really fantastic when the tree sprung out and he began to fly around on this big top thing. That was actually really cool too. But also again, there's kind of this forced climax at the end, which I again think was not needed that much, because it just came right out of nowhere and it didn't seem to have any influence on the main plot. It just needed to be there. Like there's this sick mother that they need to give her some kind of food, and that just has to take some time. I get that. need to have some kind of climax, but I think that and the fact that there wasn't a lot happening in the first act wasn't that cool. The second act is where I think it picks up and it gets really good. But yeah, this other part just kind of dragged for me a bit. But I still see why people like it a lot. And to be fair, it's much better than a lot of the other Studio Ghibli films. And I really like it good. It's not really spectacular, but it's really good still. Just check it out. Now at number 8, it's actually the first real Studio Ghibli film ever made, Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. And I will say, at first hand, I really love post-apocalyptic movies as a whole. I think they're really interesting because it's kind of like seeing how the world could be after everything is, after we've basically blown the whole planet up, or something, a big catastrophe has happened, like if there was climate change or if some other grandiose thing like a nuclear war happened or something. And that is how the effect of it all. And in this case, I really think this movie was what it did very well was definitely not only the post-apocalyptic thing, but also how the characters react to it and how their roles are in this world. So it basically takes place in this fictional universe where a lot of nature is dying out, and there's this big poisonous gas that is polluting a lot of the planet, I think. And it's this big desert area where machines are running wild, and there's these two nations or two armies trying to fight against each other for more freedom and such. And there's this girl named Nausicaa, of course, who is from the Valley of the Wind, and she tries to persuade the two armies into not trying to battle each other and trying to find peace in this giant post-apocalyptic war scenario. And all the while she's also trying to reconnect with her father, and there's also this boy she founds that she's also trying to get a relationship with. Well, not too much, but just as a friend. And all the while there's this big struggle at hand, and I like this conflict a lot. I also really like the character Nausicaa because she's a really good representation of strong female protagonists. She's also always has a plan. She's very good at doing what she's doing. She is also very fun to be around with. She has a very understandable personality, a good personality. She can be very nice at the one moment and be super serious the next, but she's always trying to be what she's meant to be, and I like that. That's kind of a little Samus Aran in her, but with probably a bit more heart to her. I also really like the other characters on the other armies, because also the fact that they aren't really trying to be bad guys as a whole, they're just trying to find the best solution and all. And once again, the visuals do a really good representation of it. I especially like the flashback scenes and how they are animated, because they show how the characters feel in a way like that. So yeah, a really strong piece, especially for being the first real Studio Ghibli film under Miyazaki's belt. If there's the problem I have with it is that it can be a bit repetitive sometimes. I think there's a little bit too much of her just flying around at the same places. The environment could probably, it's supposed to be desolate and all, but the environment could be a little bit more tweaked, I think. Probably a bit more vibrant and such. But it isn't really a huge deal. It won't take you away from how awesome some of the other scenes are, especially the action scenes. They are really great too. But yeah, maybe if it wasn't so slow and repetitive as sometimes, it could be even greater. But as it is, it's still a very fantastic movie and one you should definitely watch.
Now, number 7 is a movie that I just think is a tad underrated, and it's The Secret World of Arrietey. And the reason I think it doesn't get as much attention as it deserves is that I just don't hear a lot of people talking about it, and I think it's a shame because I think it really has a lot of good qualities that I think most Studio Ghibli movies, of course, already have. But it also, at the same time, has its own identity that and a kind of a unique gimmick to it that I think really kind of separates them a bit from the others, while at the same time also being kind of a faithful, like one of the more like slice of life Ghibli films, but also in a very cozy way. And yeah, so what the movie is about is essentially it's kind of a retelling of the English book called The Borrowers, where there are tiny people living in people's houses, and in this movie only focus on one family of tiny people, and it's a mom and dad and their daughter, and it's mainly seen from Arrietey's point of view, and mainly how she sees the human world in her own house. And the thing is that they actually, like in the book with Borrowers, they borrow stuff in their house. So they essentially sometimes sneak into the house without the people seeing them because they fear that if they get seen, they will get caught and get murdered and such, or something. Kind of gruesome, actually. But yeah, so they go into the house and borrow some stuff. Like they only borrow it because they also need, food, and they need clothing, and they need stuff that we also need. But they use like tiny stuff, or at least what is tiny to us, and it's more items for them. For example, I think like she uses I think it's a nail or some sort as a weapon, or something to protect herself with, Arrietey, when she finds it. And that's interesting how these small people will use our small things in a way. And I think that's already excellent world building because it establishes that there are these two worlds that have somehow has a connection, but at the same time also has their own way of doing things. And I really like that. But the thing is that Arrietey begins to get curious about the human world, and more specifically a human boy living in the house, which also the boy starts to get interested in because the thing is that they actually start talking to each other without seeing each other at first. And that is, of course, a big no-no for the family, but she doesn't care because she is really free-spirited and she just does what she wants, as the kind of typical Disney princess, I guess. But at the same time, she's also very brave and wants to, see the boy, even though she's probably putting her life in danger. But they start to form a bit of a connection and start to talk about all sorts of things. And the thing is that the boy's really sick, so and he's actually on the verge of dying. And so it's really tragic that he doesn't have so much time more to live and just can talk with Arrietey. And it's just really sweet. And it's basically not about much else. It's just these two relations and her trying to kind of understand the human world and him trying to understand their world. And of course there's some other characters in between, and I think his mom, the boy's mom, is the one who actually wants to capture them for some weird reason. I guess she just wants to do it because she hates them. I don't know, it's never really explained, but kind of weird. But I guess the movie just needs some kind of antagonist, I guess. But well, aside from that, the strength is really in also just all the other characters, because they're really charming and they're really like realistic in a way, I would say, even though it's of course a unrealistic story because it's tiny people who can't exist. Of course, it's done in a way that just feels really real every time I see it, and it's also maybe also in part due to the incredible animation doing this. And the thing is that this movie is not done by Miyazaki, but I think someone called Tetsuya or something. But he really did a good job in making this, and the animation is just so vibrant and colorful, and it really actually in a way makes you feel tiny when you see it, because it's like the world just feels so much bigger in a way. And it's amazing how they can do that, those Japanese animators, because it just, wow, this is actually one of the best looking Ghibli films I've ever seen, I would say. I'm really sad I didn't see it in cinemas, because I think as a little kid I was not entirely. I think it came out in my country Denmark in like 2012, 11, I guess. At that time, I maybe wasn't that interested in, I guess, especially maybe animated. Okay, I didn't like animated movies, but maybe not like Japanese animated movies. I don't know. It just didn't grab me so much at that point. Even though I saw the trailers, it was intriguing, but I never didn't really see. I saw it more recently, actually, about 2 years ago. But even though it was 2 years ago, it was still so mind blowing. Don't mind. But anyways, it's a movie that's, well, while there isn't a lot going on, it's still a really, really cool experience, and there's just so many cool tiny moments, pun intended. But yeah, there's also and such a good atmosphere. So also really, really great music. The composer of this movie has done a fantastic job. One of my favorite Ghibli soundtracks, especially Arrietey's song, which I think you should check out. It's such a good little piece, and there's so many Celtic instruments in it, and I really love those instruments, especially Celtic culture and instruments are on point. But yeah, a really, really charming, down to earth, simple, and still really thought provoking and really beautiful movie. Again, not a ton to it, but I really recommend watching it for something cozy and down to earth and great. So yeah.
Alright, so I made a bit of a switch between some of my top, I would say, 6 Studio Ghibli movies, because now that I think about it, I actually like Castle in the Sky a bit better than the next one I'm going to talk about, because this is actually my real number 6 spot. And this spot goes to probably one of Miyazaki's most adult movies and one of his most mature and realistic and harsh movies ever, but also one of his most heartbreaking. And it's Grave of the Fireflies. And this is actually one of his first movies. It came out also in the 80s, actually the same year as My Neighbor Totoro, but it's also a way different movie than that film. It's all about war and the effects of it, but it's also mainly about how 2 young people is trying to survive this apocalypse. It's not really focused on any armies or any of the like war people in this era, but more about just 2 random innocent civilians. And it's just really tragic from beginning to end, and maybe also even a little depressing, but it does still. And with that I mean that, spoiler alert, the 2 main people doesn't really survive, but there is still kind of this heartwarming feel about it sometimes in the film. And the thing I like about it is that you can really interpret it in any way you want. You could say it's pro-war or anti-war, but it's also a lot different than the traditional war movies. It's mainly about the story of how basically 2 young people died, and because it starts off with them being in kind of the spirit world, and then it cuts to how the lives were before they died. And it's just basically an older brother and his sister living in Japan, and they have to go and survive on their own because their parents can't, and the family in general can't really help them anymore. So they set out on their own journey in order to try to survive this new harsh environment. And all the while they learn a bit about themselves and how they are. Like the older brother, I really like him because he's like trying to be really strong, trying to really be more independent. He tries to not follow much of the others' rules. But what I really like about that is that he does make some really dumb decisions actually. And it's not going well for him because he just gets more and more sick, and it gets worse for both of them. But he doesn't care. He just wants to try to impress, some others, even though it doesn't really is in his favor actually. But that doesn't matter. He's just trying to do what he thinks is best, even though it doesn't turn out. But I do think it's a good role model also for the time, because it was like this image that if you couldn't do anything on your own and you just relied on others, then you weren't strong enough. You have to fight as hard as you can in order to survive, even though it wasn't for the best. But it's just this internal struggle he has, and what he's going through, and the emotional things he's going through. That's really the heart of it, as well as also the depressing stuff about it. But that's what really works. And just, there's also this incredible. The film is also artistically really great. It's not really as whimsical and as vibrant as the other movies. It's much darker. There's minimal colors in it, but when there is some great lighting and great colors on screen, it really pops out, and it also really serves to focus on this film and how it is trying to show war, but not in the usual really gritty way. It's not really that violent or bloody. It's mostly seen from like on the countryside, and we don't really see a lot of shooting and all, but there is still this, because it's a mainly nature-filled environment, there is still a harshness to it, and just this really there's some really uncomfortable scenarios also, but it's just so great because you want to see them persuade, you want to see them persevere and get on with it, even though it doesn't turn out really great. You still want to follow them on that journey, and it's just incredible because no matter what is in this main character's way, he just wants to do what is best no matter what. And that's just amazing. It's an amazing character, and especially, not to mention that the other characters are really great. The little sister is also really relatable, and you can also understand her struggle of trying to survive in this. And yeah, that's really what I really like about it. It's just not focused totally on the total war and destruction. It's just these two individuals and how they're trying to survive this terrible catastrophe, and wanting to know what happened prior to the death. I really like that. It's just this in medias res feeling, like you just see how they died, now what happened before then. And it's just amazing. But I wouldn't say it's a complete masterpiece. Like, I really also think that there are some moments that are just drags, and it's maybe, I don't really like that it's like totally gritty all the time. Like, maybe there could be a bit more heart to it and a bit more softer moments. I mean, I know it's trying to be a war film, but it isn't really like a Saving Private Ryan war film where it's really bloody and all. It's a bit more down to earth, so why couldn't that just be that, like in all the Miyazaki films? But really, they are mainly nitpicks, because the movie as a whole is really great and worth checking out, maybe even twice. So that was it. My real number 5 spot goes to Castle in the Sky again, and I want to describe it a little bit better. As I mentioned, it was one of the more recent films I watched. I hadn't really watched it a lot before, and it's actually the real first Studio Ghibli film ever made, because Nausicaa wasn't really part of Studio Ghibli when it was first released. But man, this movie is just great fun. Basically, it's a kind of a standard simple plot about just there was this girl who was attacked by some pirates in the sky. And then she fell down to this farm place where a boy finds her, and they both immediately become good friends, and they have this ambition of wanting to find the castle in the sky because they have this connection with it. And yeah, it's basically just this journey of trying to get to that castle, while there's these multiple villains trying to get them because of some different reasons. Like, they really want the girl, some of them, and others just want to get a part of that castle and all. And it's basically like this really great 80s action adventure films like Indiana Jones or Goonies and such. It's just the action is some of Miyazaki's best. It's just really fast paced and really energetic, and it really gets you pumped every time. I really love these action scenes, and I also really like the adventure bits. There's a lot of good quiet moments too. I especially love when they are at the castle at the first time, where it's just really silent, and they just go explore it and see this different world. And it's just great to watch. It's also a really great looking film. Maybe not the best looking film he has ever made, but it's still really good in that regard. And again, it's one of his more simpler movies. It's not really that character driven, and it's not really that complex, but it doesn't really matter, because what's great in it is just how the movie builds up to become this great action adventure film. And the villains are actually really great. I really like them. They're really enjoyable. The voice cast is also great, and I just love these two children. They're just so cute and adorable together, and they just, and how they work off each other is just so great. And the villains, of course, is just hilarious, especially this lady who's trying to get her. She's just so good at, because the other guards is just a bit can't really control her. She's just like in her own little world, and she tries to just get their hands on them, but she's just having fun all the way. I really like her. And also the other main bad guy is also really threatening, and you really have a sense of dread, because there's always something trying to get those kids, but they always find a way to try to evade it. And wow, the ending is also really good too. I won't spoil it, but there's like this great scene, kind of standoff scene that really made my heart rush in a bit. And no, there's not really like a lot to say about it. It's just this great world, a great fan and great action film. There's a lot of stuff happening, and once again, it's really simple, but it really works, and that's why I really like it a lot. And the next film, number 4 on the list, is probably a film that most people would just say is kind of okay, but one I really got a lot from, and that's Porco Rosso. And I think that's because I think it doesn't get as much credit as I think it should. Again, it's a really basic film, like Castle in the Sky, because it's about this World War I veteran pilot who got transformed into an anthropomorphic pig, and he that's because it's a curse that's laid upon him because of all the debt that he owed to a lot of others that he worked for. And now he's just living near this Italian place, I think, where where after a job he made, he crashed down, and he has to fix his airplane in order to get to some that he owes a lot of money to. And all the way, a girl prevents him, and they form a connection together, and they both try to figure out how they should like help each other out. Basically, it's again a really laid back and not really super action oriented film. There's some action in it, but it's kind of scarce in a way. There's not really a lot in it. But what I really like about it is the character Porco Rosso himself. He's just this really chill and also funny and all around really likable character. And I'll also say that the girl character is also really likable too. They kind of have this good chemistry, and there's just something about this film that I really like. I really like the more laid back movies of his that also have some action and some more intense scenes at times, and it's not really willing to go super dark. It can also just be this like whimsical tale where there's everything could happen, like and I get why people think that it's maybe a little weird that he is a pig, because why? It doesn't really do anything that a pig would do, and that's kind of maybe a bit distracting, but all the while I didn't really mind it that much, because it gave it a sort of identity. And yeah, even though it's kind of a weird one, I still think it's just a little hilarious, fine idea, even though they don't really do that much with it. But I will say that one of the things I don't really like about the film is that the ending is a bit vague. Like, maybe it could have ended on a bit more of a high note, and it's hard to see how it really ends, because it isn't really clear if this is a continuation or not. And that's the same. Another thing that I actually do admire about it is that it could possibly have a sequel. It does set it up in a bit so that there could be a sequel, even though there hasn't been made one, and there probably shouldn't be made one like most of his films. But it's so interesting to think about. And I don't know, it's just like a movie that I think I could just watch over and over and over the same day and never really get tired of it, because there's just such a great feel to it. I just love when they just talk together, and how he talks about his past. It's just great to listen to, and you really want to know more about him and how his life is. And it's just, yeah, it's a bit of a slice of life at times, but it's also an adventure, and it's a really good adventure. I really liked it. I know a lot of people won't say it's that amazing, but I thought it was really, really good. I won't say it's that incredible, and there are some things that I think is a bit flawed about it, but what I really like about it, I really, really like it. And I think there's some things I really love about it. It's just my thing, really, and that's why I really like it. So number 3 is what many people would consider the greatest animated movie that Studio Ghibli and Miyazaki has ever conceived. And even though it's not number 1 on my list, I still think it is just so incredible and so good every time I watch it. And it's Spirited Away. Now, a lot of people would probably say this should be number 1, and in many ways it probably should be. It's just absolutely flawless in every single way possible, and you've all probably heard of it. Maybe all of you have also seen it, and I really can't deny what they say. It's just really amazing. It's like this trippy Alice in Wonderland like feel, where suddenly everything could happen, and they really do try it a lot with it, and they stick to the idea. They do something about the idea instead of just, having this randomness for no reason. It's all part of the journey, and it's just seeing this little girl called, well, she's actually called Chiro later, but it's actually Sen actually, and basically she goes to this with her parents again, like in My Neighbor Totoro, but this time it's just only her. She's the only child, and they go to this kind of what they think is a holiday place to go to, but it turns out after eating at this place that already Sen is really confused about, her parents suddenly turn into pigs, and all this village you saw that was just really bright and not really and abandoned and such is suddenly full of life and full of spirits and all sorts of creatures at night time. And now she's really confused because what just happened? They turned into pigs, and she's really afraid and such. And then she immediately meets a boy named Haku, which teaches about this place and how dangerous it can be if she doesn't know what to do. And it's just basically her trying to get the hell away from this place by doing what is best needed and trying not to get killed. And that's actually one of the things I like. It's actually really dark when you think about it, because this world is just so unpredictable and so weird that you think that any moment her head might be chopped off or something. It's just a gruesome idea, in fact. But you can also really relate to her because she is so young, and she is of course really terrified at that age, because you are still so insecure about everything. But it's also in a way a coming of age movie, because it also is about trying to grow up and realize how kind of unfair the world can be and how harsh it can be. But at the same time doing it in a whimsical and charming way that kids can relate to, because there's just all this great imagination. And it's also definitely one of his best looking films. I love all the designs and how trippy it is, and how really, really out there this world is. It's just unlike any of his other worlds, because it's just so original. Nothing of this has been created before, in a sense. It's not based on anything. It's just his own idea, and the lengths they go to just make this world as memorable and vibrant as it is just amazing. It's just great to look at in itself. It's kind of like a great fever dream that you don't really want to wake up to, but at the same time you also want, because it's just trying to get you, and it has so many good creepy designs, and it's just wow. amazing. And also, I don't think, it's in many ways it's kind of a really creepy movie. There is a lot of really weird looking creatures and scary scenarios, so it's probably not best for like really young children to see. But I also wouldn't say it's that bad, so that like none of them would be really super scarred for life. But probably don't see it when you're like 3 or 4 years old. I wouldn't recommend that. You also probably wouldn't understand a lot of the ideas. But yeah, it's just, I really also like when there are these more silent moments, like in the train scene when they're just seeing. It's just really slow paced, but you can just see out of the window and see the world, and it's just how the spirits interact with it, and it's just there's something about it that, again, like the Toro scene, it just grabs you in. You're so immersed in it, and in general, this movie is a bit like escapism, but it's also about, as I said before, coming of age story and growing up in a world that may not be that realistic, but also one that you can see is also as really stressful and as chaotic as the real world. And in that ways, it's just a really perfect fantasy film in a way, one that is both whimsical and out there, and one you can learn from. That's what I really love about it. The characters are great, the animation is great, the story is great, the atmosphere is great. The soundtrack is also some of his best, I would say. And it's just incredible. You heard what people say about it. Go check it out. You won't regret it one bit. It's just an amazing film. But it's not really my favorite too. These next two are just a bit better, I would say, because it just hit me a bit more. I know for a lot of people this is the greatest, but these next two just really, they have a more special place in my heart that I also really need to explain why that is. But once again, I haven't seen a movie like this, and I doubt I never will, because there's just too many great things about this film. Go check it out if you haven't. You won't regret it.
And now for my second favorite Ghibli film, which for some may not be one of their favorites or even in their top 3, but is something rather special for me. It's Kiki's Delivery Service. And I just gotta say that right off the bat, I was not expecting to like this film as much as I did. I mean, after all, a cute little movie about a witch girl with a bow on her head that delivers pastries and other delicacies to people, may not sound like a masterpiece on paper, but after seeing it for the first time, not too long ago actually, I began to see the simplistic beauty that this movie conveys. And that is actually quite impressive, considering that there is actually not a lot going on in this film. It basically follows a 13-year-old girl witch named Kiki, who after turning 13 is apparently already set to leave her home and find her own place in the world. And I just think, yikes, what is it about anime children leaving their home at such a young age? I'm looking at you, Ash. But anyways, after flying away with her cat Gigi, she stumbles upon a nearby town where she decides to stay. She finds a baker named Ono who can get her a job as basically a delivery girl. Now, fun fact, I myself have worked as a delivery boy with a delivery service called Volt, which is a Finnish company actually. So this movie especially relates to me in that way. And the rest of the story is really just about her trying to fit in, get used to her job, and meeting some different interesting people along the way. And really, that's all it really needs. The movie is also paced in that way too, as it really takes its time with each scene, and it really helps with taking in the rich atmosphere the film contains. The environments look so gorgeous, and the music is also some of the best of all the Ghibli movies, especially the song called Soaring, which could be heard on the English dub though, which I would stretch is a really, really good dub. In fact, maybe the best English dub of all the Ghibli movies, if I'm being honest. But I think the thing that resonates me with the most about this film is just the laid-back and almost vacation-like feeling this movie gives off. It's kind of amazing how a simple conversation that Kiki has with a local citizen in this movie can be just as investing as an action scene in Dragon Ball Z, for example. And it may also have something to do with my love of movements, where there's also a lot of quiet slice-of-life scenarios. And I really think it's a shame that they do not make movies like this anymore. Mainly because so much children's media is more focused on high speed, to wacky characters, and just a lot of things happening. Because I think they are so wonderful, and I can't really explain why. I especially love the character Kiki because she actually undergoes a bit of character development. At first, she just wants to find her own identity, like most teenagers want to do, of course. But over the course of the movie, she also learns to understand other people and not be so stubborn and closed in. I really like that. And I think it is done so brilliantly. In a really subtle touch, but it's just so neatly done. It's a really realistic kind of character in a lot of ways, and the way what she's going through. And really, what can I say? I just cannot find much wrong with this film, actually. I just really love it, and I think you will too, if you like more laid-back and actionless films, of course. But even if you like more action in your movies, I really recommend trying to check this one out, because yeah, from the looks of it, it may not look as like anything special, actually. And I think most even people who really like Ghibli movies may think that too. But just I can't really explain it. There's something about how this movie is made, and even though it's not much, it's actually it does a lot with, it does so much with doing so little, actually. But in a way, it does so much through those small things, and I think this movie really exemplifies that with how it shows all those things. And I just can't say anymore. Just you should check it out, and I think there's something you would like about it. Just even the teeniest, tiniest things, I think you would really like about it. And personally, it's just a great film, but not my favorite Ghibli film, and that's coming up soon. So stay tuned for that. But otherwise, this is still so phenomenal, and I can watch it every day, anytime, and never get tired of it. So great. Now it is finally time for my all-time favorite Studio Ghibli movie, which is Princess Mononoke. Now, I really love just about every movie on this list, but this film is something truly special for me. This is not only my favorite Ghibli film and my favorite animated feature film, but it is also one of my favorite movies of all time, which is also something I could say for some of my top Ghibli movies. In fact, this one in particular may be in my top 3 movies of all time, actually. But enough of this babbling. What is it that makes this movie so special for me? Well, basically everything. This is easily the most perfectly executed of all the animated movies I have ever seen. The story and the characters are just brilliant. The animation is so spectacular and has some of the best artistry I've ever seen in a film. Normally, I would have a story retrospective and explanation during these entries, but I don't want to spoil a single thing from this movie, since I think it needs to be experienced by yourself. But I can tell you that it will just blow you away with how good it is told. And it even has a subtle environmental message in it, and incredibly real and morally great characters that feel so humane, and even in a world with forest spirits and horrific creatures. Like I said before, this is a movie that I won't even spoil a single bit of story of, since I think it needs to be seen and understood. With that said, it is also one of the darkest and most mature out of all the Ghibli movies, and even though I saw it first when I was a relatively mature teenager, even I found it pretty intense at times. But I find what really works with this film is its downright perfect blend of both action, drama, and pure beauty. It just feels like everything isn't too rushed or too dragging. It always seems to have just the right amount of pacing for me. And that's really impressive considering that this movie is a little over 2 hours long, and in that time, I think just the right amount of story is being told. There's just so much I could say about this amazing film, but I think I have said enough. In conclusion, I will recommend this film to a lot of moviegoers, and in general all of the Ghibli movies, since I think they are the peak of Japanese animation and an amazing gateway into Japanese culture and art. I also think they helped make me appreciate anime more than I did in my childhood, and even though I don't love every anime series or movies that has been made, these movies are what I see as not only amazing anime movies, but more as great pieces of Japanese animation and Japanese national treasures. Thank you for all and have a great day.